Hello and welcome back. This is the third video now that I'm making on this channel, and I wanted to just give a quick update on what I had promised in the last video. So I had set up this goal of trying to ask at least three other individuals about their experiences, their quote unquote religious experiences, or the way that I ended up putting it so that it would be sort of more universally acceptable or understood as experiences of deep meaning. And and I made a sort of attempt at describing what that experience entails. Um, And this is what I had written for that. So I said, these experiences are primarily characterized by a deep sense of meaning and sometimes by a sense of connection with some higher power, entity, or order of the universe. Generally, such experiences are also accompanied by other strong, positive emotions of well-being, love, or ecstasy. So I asked three people uh, a set of questions about whether they had experienced such feelings before, what were the triggers that caused them to have this feeling, about what their thoughts or images, mental images they might have had right before the feeling, what physiological effects did this feeling have on them, what was the significance or interpretation that they put on this event or on this experience, how they ranked the importance of the experience, how frequent they had this experience, and how impacted their mood and behavior, whether they thought that this experience was about the real world or whether it was about it was sort of internally generated, and then on responsivity, the answer of a question of do you feel that uh, whatever, if you do have this experience, you feel like you have contact with some higher power or some higher principle of in the world, do you feel that it is responsive to you, um, it's your thoughts or intentions or actions? And then I asked them for their personal beliefs, whether they were an adherent of a recognized world religion, spiritual but not religious, um, as in they believe in some higher power or principle but do not identify with any religious group, or they were atheist, so do not believe in a higher power at all, or prefer not to answer. So those were the questions that I asked people. And I thought it might be good here to go through the responses that I have received thus far, um, and to just read through them just to get an idea of what people are saying to these questions. And then from there, we can discuss further. So this is the first individual that answered these questions. So this is a female in her late 20s, and she says, experience of deep meaning. So she has experienced deep meaning. She says yes. So the triggers are very often music, meaningful events, usually social, sometimes looking at the sky, going to particularly nostalgic places, and occasionally when inebriated or fatigued. Then I asked about the mental images or thoughts right before the onset of these feelings, and she says, I'm not sure, but overall, the feeling sometimes might bring up imagery of nature. So interesting there. Psychological, physiological effects, she says, sometimes there is a feeling of a rush and maybe goosebumps, sometimes like movement under my skin, but not in a bad way. Oftentimes I'll cry too. For the significance or interpretation, she says, if the event is an epiphany, I think I like to think of it as a major rewiring of my brain, where new pathways formed out of existing pathways that allow me to experience and react to the world in a new way. And other times it is more of a major emotional experience. I think of it as if a bunch of stimuli aligned just right to cause a major activation in a lot of parts of my brain. On a more emotional, spiritual level, I like to think of these things as what brings life joy and meaning, and as a reminder from the universe as to how special it is to be able to experience anything at all. So then that question was, how important would you rate these experiences? She says very important. And then frequency, she says she experienced it more than once a year. And impact on mood and behavior, she says that overall, I think they have a short-term positive impact on my mood, but I'm not sure how much they affect my behavior. Then principles of perception of reality. Do you see these feelings as communicating truth about the external world, or do you believe that such feelings are only internally generated in your own mind? So she says, I think they help reinforce some truths about meaning with respect to the external world. And then I ask, uh, uh, the question of responsivity, and she says, sometimes I do feel like I have control over my overall luck through my behavior. Um, and then and then the last question is about personal beliefs. And she says she selected both spiritual but not religious option and atheist option. And she says conflicted on this one. So that's the first person there. So it sounds like this individual does have these experiences, not too frequently, but more than once a year, but less than once a month. So on occasion, they have these experiences. They're triggered by music, meaningful events, looking at the sky, or going to nostalgic places, which is all, I think, standard, triggers, like they're common triggers for these kinds of feelings. Um, the psychological effect of feeling like a rush or goosebumps, that's also kind of a common physiological effect. Um, and so it seems, though, that they primarily see this as something they something that happens in their own mind, that it's not um, uh, that it's not necessarily exclusively, it's sort of an in-between answer. So it reinforces, they say that these experiences reinforce some truths about meaning with respect to the external world. So here there's sort of it's necessary to have a follow-up question of okay, like, do you think though that meaning is something that you produce from yourself, or is it something that is sort of inherent in the external world itself? But overall, interesting answers to that question. Okay, now let's look at the second response. So this is a female in her 40s. So experience of deep meaning. Yes, she does experience deep meaning. Triggers, what are the situations or activities that trigger this feeling for you? She says, search for meaning in loneliness or despair, deep meditation, running and exercise, family and friends. And then mental images or thoughts. Are there specific mental images or thoughts that flash in your mind right before the onset of this feeling? And she says, more like a feeling of peace and contentment. And then I ask for physiological effects, and she says, a kind of sensation beginning in the chest, heart, and spreading through the extremities. Interesting, okay. Significance and interpretation, she says, I think it is an internal realignment of the lenses that interpret our life experiences, similar to the expansion and contraction of a telescope. Interesting. So this is quite a similar response here to the previous respondent as well. Then how do you think these so how important do you think these experiences? She says somewhat important instead of very important. So that's interesting. And then how frequently do you have these feelings on average? And she says more than once a year. And then what's the impact on your behavior or mood? How do these experiences affect your mood or behavior, both in the long term and short term? And then she says, it depends. Sometimes it's short lived. Sometimes I get inspired and work to create longer term effects, but those take work, as any changes take, as any change takes time. Interesting. And then she said, and then the question is, do you see these feelings as communicating truth about the external world, or do you believe that such feelings are only internally generated in your own mind? She says, what is truth? I think that what you are trying to describe is a composition of internally generated and external data. The challenge is in interpreting and integrating perspective. Who are you? What do you want? Are the answers you give a truth or the truth? Just in answering, you're changing what is, what was, and what will be. Interesting. So this is a very abstract answer here. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but it's interesting nonetheless. And then responsivity. Do you feel that the something higher which you feel connected to, with which you feel connected, is responsive to your thoughts, intentions, or actions? She says no. And then personal belief, how would you describe yourself? She says, none of the above. So neither an adherent of a world religion, nor spiritual but religious, or atheist. And I give a brief description of each one of these. She says, none of the above. I would have gone with B, spiritual but not religious, but then you brought a bit about higher power. So she says, believe, because I put between parentheses for B, belief in some higher power, but do not identify with any religious group. So that is the second individual. And now let me pull up also the answers for the third individual here. Okay, sorry. So this individual, yes, they do experience these experiences of deep meaning. What are the triggers? So for them, the primary trigger was actually meditation. But they've also had similar, but not the same experiences with physical exercise. So mental images or thoughts. Um, sometimes visualizing just space, um, and or visualizing their own consciousness as either a point or as some two-dimensional or three-dimensional figure. Um, so that's the start, and usually that will be the image or thought right before this onset of this feeling. Physiological effects, nothing really, but goosebumps sometimes. Um, uh, Significance and interpretation. Um, that these experiences help direct you and help put things in context. And he feels that the problems he has are not a big deal after he has these experiences. Um, so then how important do you find this? He says very important. So this is, oh, I should have mentioned, this is a male in his mid-20s. How often do you experience these feelings on average? So he says, um, actually more like more than once a year as well. Okay, so impact on mood and behavior. He says, yeah, a feeling of peace and of being able to put priorities in life, like prioritize things in life, and a feeling that the problems they're facing are not so big or insurmountable or not a big deal. And then I ask about perception of reality, as in, do you see these feelings as communicating truths about the external world, or do you believe that such feelings are only internally generated in your own mind? So they actually do lean in the direction of saying that they are um, in the external world. They say, um, uh, Uh, he says, sorry, I'm just trying to locate the answer. He says, um, uh, so he says, it is within my mind. There's a component of it that is external to me. So they like, yes, this view is truer in a fundamental sense than other experiences that I have. So essentially, they say that it's an experience in their mind, but they do think that there's a component that's external to them, that they're sort of reacting to. And then the question of responsivity, like, do you feel that this is something that is responsive to you? And he says, no, it's not. And then personal beliefs, would you describe yourself as an adherent of a recognized world religion, spiritual but not religious? Atheists prefer not to answer. They say be spiritual but not religious. So, some interesting commonalities there. So the first interesting commonality is that all the answers are yes. Um, so it does seem like everyone does have these experiences. Um, a common also themes in terms of triggers. Several people included running and exercise. Um, and also several people included meditation um, as possible triggers for these feelings. Um, mental images or thoughts. Uh, Here, actually, there's a lot of variance. So you have one person who kind of doesn't really, is not sure, but sometimes has imagery of nature. One person who has flashes of, visualizing their own consciousness um, in space, and one has more of like just a feeling of just peace and contentment. Um, for physiological effects, I think you also have kind of common themes, sort of. So, for mm, uh, people mention sometimes having goosebumps, and also this feeling of rushing, or um, a feeling in the chest that moves to the extremities. So pretty divergent answers, actually, in terms of physiological signs. Significance and interpretation. So it seems like most people see these events as some sort of internal realignment, um, as in that something is changing in how they perceive the world, and that's the significance that they ascribe to this. Um, so, in the terms of how important do you think these experiences are, we had two people say very important and one person say somewhat important, so they tend to be more important. And then the frequency, actually, this one was kind of surprising. Um, so, I thought that in the general public, these feelings may be more occur more often in people, but it seems like for most people, they would just say somewhere between less than once a month, but more than once a year. Um, is where most people end up there. And then impact on mood and behavior. It seems like impact is more, tends to be kind of more short term, feeling good, but it's hard to say whether there's actual changes on long term behavior. It seems like that requires more effort, I guess. Uh, and then perception of reality, like, do you think this is something in your own head or it's something about the external world? Here, the answers are quite different, but it does seem like um, most people would kind of say something in between, um, where it's definitely something that is inside of you, that is generated within you and how you see the world, but also that there's a component to it that's outside of you, that you are recognizing something in the external world, seeing a pattern that's actually there in the world. So But here also responses vary a lot. Interestingly, none of the respondents thought that when they had this experience that there's something higher with which they were in contact was really responsive to them, with the exception of one respondent who said that she said that she felt like she had some control over her own luck by her actions. So I guess that can kind of count as sort of responsive, and know that this entity behind the world is responsive, or whatever you believe is behind the world is responsive to them. And it seems like actually all three people would have gone with spiritual but not religious, or atheist, do not believe in a higher power. So interesting responses there. I think I'll continue on with this survey. I'll also link the document, put the survey document in the comment section for this video. So if you're interested in looking more closely at the questions, I'm also sending out the survey to a bunch of more people. I want to get a sample size of 30 individuals responding to this survey before I sort of begin to actually like compile results in a more systematic way. But yeah, this is interesting. I'm glad I did this because, first of all, I think people enjoy talking about the subject just in general. And so I'm glad I did this, because this is something, even though people enjoy talking about it, it's not something that comes up very often in conversation. So it's good to know like what the experiences of just the general public is about these experiences, because it's always dangerous to just begin with yourself and think that everyone's experience is similar to yours, because people vary a lot, like in surprising ways, um, so it's good to try to be more objective with that, and that was sort of the purpose of the survey. So we'll continue on with the survey. I'll try to get 30 respondents to the survey, and then compile the final results. And I will talk to you guys when the survey's concluded, and we'll go through the results and break down what the results were. But yeah, so that's it for that. There's also something else I actually wanted to also do. So I really wanted to talk to, I guess, religious figures to see what they think about this question. So what I'll try to do over the next few days probably is I'll try to send to identify 3 quote unquote religious authorities, and try to get into contact with them, and to ask them specifically about this question of like religious experience, and why like God, why the shoebox experiment doesn't work, and yeah, and that would be interesting to see what their answers or responses are to that question. But yeah, I was just thinking right now, I think I've already identified one of the 3 individuals that I'd want to reach out to. So this is Bishop Robert Barron, I think his name is. I think he would be an interesting guy to ask this question, just to see like what he thinks. I don't know. He's quite popular, so I don't know um, if I would be able to get into contact with him, but I can certainly try, and see what happens, and I'll let you guys know what happens after that. Okay, so that's my job. Till next time, identify three religious figures that are authorities, three religious authorities, and try to ask them this question um, of why. Yeah, the questions that I just outlined to you guys. Um, and yeah, so just to reiterate, from our last episodes, I should have probably started with this, but the situation now is we do think that there are these religious experiences, and I believe that these experiences are the grounds of like religion. Um, and I do think that most people historically have interpreted these experiences as some sort of connection or contact with a higher power, um, with God or the gods or whatever it may be. And so um, essentially, but on the other hand, this higher power doesn't seem to respond to that. If it is indeed that there's a higher power there, first you want to know whether these feelings are trustworthy or not. And then if they are trustworthy, um, why they occur irregularly, and then why doesn't sort of God or the gods reveal themselves in a more obvious way, like respond to the shoebox experiment. Um, so that's essentially where we're at. So those are the questions that we're trying to ask. And so hopefully by next time, I will have some answers for more answers for you guys after asking some religious authority figures and seeing their responses. And we'll pick up the discussion from there. Um, hope that you enjoyed this short video. And again, the survey results, the survey is in the description, so that you can refer to that. Okay, that's it for now. Have a nice day. Bye.